Hello, everyone. Making sure everybody's here. Hello, everyone. I am Donna Heckler, and I am so happy to be participating in this conference today, The Adventures of Sharing Christ. Susan asked that I share a little story that I often speak about, and the talk that I give is called "And Then God Gave Me a Timeout." In fact, He gave me a few. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit of that talk with you today. And whenever I do share this talk of a timeout, I always start by asking people, have you ever had a timeout from God? I mean, I've had a few. And these two in particular were rather large. And so I'm going to share those with you. But to do that, I always feel like I have to set the groundwork. I have to sort of lay out the context in which these timeouts occurred. So let me do that. It's the least favorite part of the talk, but if I don't set the stage, it's hard to understand why those timeouts were so important and meaningful to me. So to explain my timeouts, I have to set the groundwork in terms of my career. That's how I was spending so much of my time. I had what I called a crazy busy life. I worked for and led the global marketing for many multi-billion-dollar companies. And they Cardinal Health, Menon, in fact, Energizer even sent me to Hong Kong, and I led marketing for Energizer all throughout the Far East for a while. And it was because of that experience in Asia that I started to become known for doing global marketing. And the thing about global marketing is that I was 24/7 before 24/7 was a thing, because I was always having to be available for the various countries that I was supporting. So it was not uncommon for me to be on the phone at 2 in the morning, because that's when it was convenient for somebody in Africa or China. Because it was global, I was managing budgets of millions of dollars, and I had hundreds of people working on the teams for me, with me, really, around the world. But here's the thing, I sort of thought that if I was really busy, then I must be important. I thought that if it took you like 2 weeks to get on my calendar, that I must be relevant. Somehow I thought that if I was really busy, I must matter. And it was in the context of this busyness, that my first timeout occurred. I was headed to my aunt's funeral. She'd actually passed away from breast cancer, as it turned out. And I was stepping out of the hotel's elevator, getting ready to go into the lobby, and the family was going to meet up in Chicago and go to the funeral together. So I go to step out of the elevator, and while we couldn't prove it, I absolutely know that there was syrup on the floor. And I stepped in the syrup, and my leg twisted, and we broke the ankle and the knee. I tore ligaments and tendons in the ankle and the knee, and I was put in a cast from toe to hip. So my leg was straight out. We finally get me back to St. Louis, and I go to my orthopedic surgeon, and I said, I have to go. I have to get back to work. And the surgeon said, no, you have to rest. And I said, well, I can't rest at work. That's what I do. I have to work. And he said, no, you need to rest. He said, take a week, come back in a week, and then we will figure out what the game plan is. So I go home for a week and I rest. I come back a week later. I say, okay, I rested. Time to go. Got to get back to work. And he said, no, you've got to rest for a long time. And I said, you don't understand. I am my work. That's who I am. That's what I need to do. And he said, no, you don't understand. I cannot guarantee that you will ever walk again. I can guarantee that if you do not rest, you will never walk again, Donna. The choice you're making is between your leg or your job. What's going to be, Donna? What's it going to be? So I rested. In fact, I was on disability for 6 months and in a wheelchair for 6 months. But I visited my house. I had what I called a cute little Donna house, a tiny little house in St. Louis. I just loved it. It was a great little retreat. I don't think I knew that at the time, but I certainly began to experience that. It had a fenced-in yard and gardens and a little fountain. And I would just sit on my screened-in porch for hours on end. I loved to read, but honestly, there was so much pain I couldn't even really read. I couldn't focus. My parents, such angels, my mother especially, was always spending time with me, and she was on the porch with me, and we were sitting there, and I looked up at her, and I said, you know what, Mom, I really have beautiful flowers in this garden, don't I? And she looked at me incredulous. She goes, don't you know? Don't you know? I didn't know. How could I know? I was never there. I would leave the house at 7 in the morning. I'd usually get up at 6 and be on a conference call while I got ready. Then I'd leave the house. It was dark when I left. I'd be in meetings all day. Then I'd run out to dinner with somebody from work. And then I'd try to be home by 9 because I was usually back on the front of Asia at that time. I was leaving the house in the dark and I was returning in the dark, and I was missing everything that was happening in the light of day. But in the light of day, as I sat on that porch, I started to see the flowers that had always been in my own backyard. I had just never seen them before. The thing was, everybody around me knew what was there. The fountain guy, I fixed fountain, the gardeners, everybody knew, just not me. But in the light of day, I started to see the flowers. Over time, my leg healed, and I thought, okay, this is good, I'm better. And I know what to do now. You know, I've been spending time, I've been quiet, I've been praying, and I thought, no, I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to get to work at 8 and leave at 6. It's not going to be nearly as long as normal. It had only been about a month after I'd been back to work that we had our second time out. I really thought that I had figured things out, but what I quickly learned was that God wasn't done with me yet. There was still so much more I needed to learn. We were having a very hard time helping my ankle and my leg calm down from the break and all the inflammation. So they were putting me on one medication after another. And one medication had an odd side effect of asthma, which of course I got. And the asthma led to pneumonia. And so I had pneumonia and a horrible cough, horrible. And I'd cough and I'd hold my side. And it was as I was holding my side that I felt it. And I went back to the doctor and I said, I think we've got a problem here. And she said, I think you've broken a rib. I said, I don't think so. Let's do a mammogram. The mammogram did not think it was a broken rib. So the next thing you know, I'm getting a biopsy. A few days later, the doctor called. I remember very vividly, I was in the car with my sister and my niece, who was all 10 years old, was sitting behind us. And I remember thinking to myself, whatever you do, Donna, say everything out loud so your sister knows what's happening here. And so we did. Hello? Yes, this is Donna. Oh, hello, doctor. Oh, you have some bad news. Yes, it's unfortunate. It's cancer. See, do you know the type? Do you know the stage? So you don't know any of that yet. Well, what do we do now? Okay, so I call you in the morning and make an appointment. So we begin to figure things out. Yes, I'll call you in the morning. Yes, I will call you in the morning. I will, and you have a nice day as well. Who does that? Right? But we do. In these moments, we try and find something normal. I looked back at my sister, and she had tears in her eyes, and I looked at my niece, and I thought, why did a 10-year-old have to hear this? And that started my second and really big time out. This was stage 3 HER-positive cancer. It had popped up in 8 months, which was roughly when I had fallen. And it had grown to be bigger than a tennis ball. It's 10 centimeters. I had 6 surgeries to rebuild the leg. And now I was facing 6 chemo treatments, double mastectomy. I ended up with an additional 5 surgeries due to complications, radiation treatments, ambulance trips, hospital trips, infections. It was 10 years and 7 months ago today, not keeping track. But this was a huge time out. But what was different this time is that it was really calm. It was really calm. I sort of knew what I had to do. Because of what had happened to the leg, I had learned some things. I had learned that I was not in control, that I had to trust. I had to trust the doctors, the hospitals, but most importantly, I had to trust God. And because of that trust, I truly was very calm through all of the cancer treatments. And it was funny because there were these enormous boulders in my way. I mean, mind you, I'd gone back to work and my job was global. So I was going to have to figure out how to travel. And how do you do that when, I'm barely off crutches and I'm going through chemo? What does that look like? So I'm in a meeting with a bunch of people who are actually sorting out my travel. And we receive an email all at the same time. And the email is from the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, and he says, we're not making our numbers, so effectively immediately, everybody is going to have to stop travel. And I was stunned, to the team. I was like, this is horrible. I gotta get out and meet people and let them know things are okay. And inside I'm going, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God, right? Because I could not have moved that boulder. It needed God to take care of it. The other big thing that concerned me, there were many, but this other really big one, was that my chemos were really long. They were 7 hours at least. And I didn't know how I was going to do that. How do you work and go to an office when you're going through chemo? And at the time, we were going to the office every day. So, and I was doing my chemos on Friday because I knew that I would be really sick for a few days after, and that would give me the weekend to recover and then race back to the office, right? That's how Donna rolls. So I'm worried about this because as the chemos progressed, it was taking longer and longer for me to recover. So one day we get a note that the company's decided that everybody can now work from home, that most people were now on conference calls all day long, and so there was no need to always be in the office. And if there was a big meeting, we'd know and we could come in, or if I needed to schedule a meeting, I could do that in advance. So I'm getting this note and I'm thinking, are you kidding me? I can now work from chemo. And that's what I did. But again, I was so present to God. He was right in the middle of this. I couldn't have resolved these things for myself. But God was there, moving these boulders out of my way, left and right. A dear friend of mine from work, she would come over many days and bring me soup. She knew what was going on. And she looked at me one day. We would sit back on that same screened-in porch. She looked at me one day and she said, Donna, how are you so calm? We know what happened to your leg and how much it stressed your body to have that leg rebuilt. And now here you are, going through chemo and radiation and surgeries again. How are you so calm? Where you might not survive. And I have to tell you, I don't think I understood the depth of my faith until I had that conversation with Jen, because I looked at her and I said, well, I trust God. If God needs me, He'll take me. If He needs me here, I'll be here. Because He needed me here. That opened up a conversation with Jen about faith. And that's something I would never have done in corporate. You don't talk about faith at corporate. At least that was my understanding. But we started to talk about faith. And I said, Jen, why did you need to ask me about this? And she said, I somehow knew you were really faith-filled. And I said, how would you know that? We never talked about this. And she said, well, I have to tell you, you would never cuss. And anytime you were upset at work, what we'd hear echoing through the halls was, oh, heavens. And she said, and if it was really bad, we'd hear, oh my heavens. So here I am, sitting on this very strange porch where I'd seen the flowers. And now I'm seeing Janet. I'm seeing this most beautiful person that I hadn't really seen before. I hadn't been present to her. And there were so many people like that that it became really present to. They've been in my life all along, much like those flowers. I just hadn't always seen them. But now, as I sat quietly with God, relied on Him, trusted Him during this time, I was becoming aware of not just flowers, but amazing people, amazing children of God who'd always been in my life. Life unfolds. I continued working through the cancer. 3 years after my diagnosis, the markers were still high. And so my oncologist says to me, I'm going to invite you to leave your job. I don't think it's cancer, I think it's stress. So from my perspective, first I've heard, it's your job or your leg. Now I'm hearing, it's your job or your life. What's going to be done? So I left. I left corporate and I started leaning in, is how I would say it, to my faith. Now, mind you, I had never written about faith. I'd never talked about faith, and I would never have done that in corporate. But God's been dragging me along, kicking and screaming. And the reality is, He was exceptionally present every step of the way as I went through these timeouts. And I knew that. I felt that. And I could see that. And so I started to say yes more and more. One day somebody said to me, we want to give you an award. A Catholic organization wants to give you a Woman of the Year award. Just talk about your faith. I'm like, oh, no, I don't talk about my faith. I don't do that. She said, well, then you won't get the award. I said, well, maybe I don't want the award. She said, stop that. Go pray about it. So I did. And I gave what became this talk. And then God gave me a timeout for the first time just 3 years ago. And it was so stunning to me to see the reaction, because what I was hearing was everybody has timeouts. We all have timeouts. We all have crazy, busy lives, and these things happen to us. And when we're willing to share, we begin to recognize a few things. One, that we're not alone. Not only are we not alone because we all have timeouts, but we're not alone because God is with us every step of the way. And that is something that is so worth sharing. Through my timeouts, I started to see a few things. I started to recognize that I wasn't living in darkness. I could live in the light. And from the light, I can see so many things. I can see the flowers in my own backyard. I can see these beautiful people. And I recognize so importantly that we don't matter because we're busy. We matter because we're children of God. And so as it's Lent, and whenever I do the talk, I always like to end by saying, I invite you. No, God invites you to take the time out with Him. And with that, see if I think we've got 2 or 3 minutes for any questions. So thank you, everybody who's been joining along. It is interesting to share this story because, as I said, I just never want to. It was so hard, but God has been dragging me all along, and I think God drags a lot of us. For me, it was learning to say yes. See if there's any questions here. I love the comments, some wonderful comments, which is nice. I'm so glad that this struck a chord with so many of you. It's been a wonderful conference, and I'm privileged and honored that I could share my little story with you as well. So, have I had a chance to advise someone in the same situation, life or job? Actually, that happens quite a bit, and I don't think it's intentional. It's not like I'm going out trying to advise, but what happens is that in the course of a conversation, all of a sudden somebody will say something and it will occur to me that they're really focused on the busyness of every day, and I invite them to sit quietly and we start to have some quiet conversations, and then I help talk to them about what's busy in their world. So that does happen But it's not necessarily intentional. I sort of feel like it's Holy Spirit